What's up, everybody? This is Patrick Steffens from Avis & Young, and we're here today in the next episode of the Big Apple's CoreNet New York City podcast. Joined today by James Donovan from Rokt, recruiting lead and meme specialist.
Yep.
Gotta say, the first person I've ever encountered with meme specialist in their official business title.
Yeah, I will say I did get to take a little bit of a liberty with that. The chief people officer, I think I caught her like at a time where she was really busy, and I was like, "Hey, can I throw this into my title?" And she's like, "Yeah, you do whatever you want." And I was just like, "Well, LinkedIn, it's not, it'll definitely turn some heads, get some notice, but huge meme fan. I think really what it comes down to is fun way to communicate, interact with people, and I like to leverage that for sure." So
yeah, right on. I would say memes these days are not just the jokes you send with your buddies late nights and early mornings. There is professional messages that can be delivered with memes. I know you've been pretty spot on with your LinkedIn and some of your writing, incorporating memes in the middle of these blog posts.
Yeah, no, I think, to me, what a meme really is just a strong way of communicating a nuanced idea, right? And like I've done a lot of reading on this. Like you talk about Richard Dawkins, he talks about the selfish gene and ideas perpetuating themselves. And we have the internet. I think really memes and GIFs, they came about as like a way to better communicate in this kind of fast-paced digital space where everyone has these very short attention spans, and you just want to kind of get an idea across. You kind of leverage the visual, but also an analogy. It's a very effective way to explain something, and if you can leverage that shared cultural understanding that we all have, right? We were talking about Anchorman earlier, right?
Exactly.
It's like,
everybody's seen it. And
yeah.
Even if you haven't seen it in years, you can still pick up on a couple of key points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. You get to get exposed to certain cultural movies or things. Sometimes not even just by watching the movie anymore, just by seeing the memes. So,
right on. So, thanks for joining us today. Wanted to start broad and work our way down. How about a little introduction on Rokt and the company, where it started, how it's going, where it's headed, a little bit of background info for the listeners.
Sure. Yeah. So Rokt was actually founded in Sydney, Australia back in 2012. Our founder, Bruce Buchanan, he worked at a airline company as the CDO there. And I think he basically discovered how valuable that transaction moment on an e-commerce site can be, and it makes a lot of sense that, in that kind of travel industry, right, you book a flight, you need to get a hotel or a car or something like that, right, being able to kind of connect these relevant opportunities, could generate a lot of value. And, taking that into that kind of logical next step of, why not all of e-commerce, right? Why not connect all of e-commerce in a way that all of these companies can now kind of benefit from each other, right? One of the ways I like to describe this is it's like a digital mall, right? You go to the mall, you might buy one thing, right? You walk out of that store and then you see a bunch of other stores and you're like, oh, right, like I need to get a gift for a friend or, a new pair of shoes or whatever it is, right? And you end up making these additional purchases you wouldn't have made just by virtue of the fact of kind of being exposed to these other opportunities.
So it's similar to at this point, everybody's bought something online before, and, customers who have also purchased this looked at these. If you're buying shoes, there's a good chance you're looking at socks or something like that.
Something like that. I think, the advantage that we have over other companies is they're usually limited to whatever their product offerings or their service offerings are, right? And for us, we can interconnect in a way that kind of transcends that limited offering, right? We can I think the most obvious example of this is Amazon, right? You buy a coffee maker, you get some coffee beans. They'll try to sell you some coffee beans. For us, it's like, hey, maybe you bought this coffee maker because you want to wake up earlier in the morning, right? Maybe there's wake up services, like meditation stuff, or, maybe there's other things that, are outside of, that product group that are relevant to kind of why you're on the internet, what you're looking for, because usually you buy a product for an end, right? To get something. And if we can kind of understand what that is and kind of help you find other things that are relevant, that increases the value for both the customer, but, also for that e-commerce site and for our partners.
And those companies I'm sure, love to add when people add additional items into that cart and build that bill, and all of a sudden they're spending a hell of a lot more when they thought they were getting a $25 coffee maker. So there's a ton of inherent value you guys can create out of seemingly nothing.
Yeah, and it's great because I think it's not just limited to products too, right? There's a lot of other ways that you can interact with customers, right? Is whether it's building that relationship. I was talking to actually a candidate earlier today for a product management position, and he was talking about how one of the things that companies really need, e-commerce sites really need, is that customer loyalty, right? That stickiness. Like how do we stay in touch? How do we build that relationship? And that's another big thing that we're kind of thinking of is like, not just having the transaction moment be that moment that you're walking out the door, but that moment where you're kind of building that relationship a little bit more as well.
Yeah, so you head into that mindset as the recruiting lead, right? Can you give us a little bit of background as to the value you bring to the organization, looking for prospective candidates, trying to fill open positions and or creating new ones based on company demand?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting time for talent acquisition right now, considering just how hot the market has been. And I think that, for me especially, part of the reason that I got into talent acquisition was because I think one of the most important factors to success of a business is the people that are there, right? You can have a great product, you can have a great market fit, but if the people don't gel, if they're not motivated and dedicated to what they're doing, if you don't have the right skill sets on the team, it's really difficult to achieve that success.
I believe, don't quote me here, but I believe that the company's biggest line item in terms of dollars spent is on their people.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially software companies, right? Because, we don't need those physical, we're not buying, physical materials to create into products or whatever. It's all kind of that people thought product.
Building and creating intellectual capital.
Exactly. And for me, I think that finding that right fit, I always say, like, I'm a big dum-dum, right? I don't really know much about business or
talking to me,
finance.
Man. You're definitely smarter than the rest of us.
But if I hire someone, right, who's really good at engineering, if I hire someone who's really good at finance, right, and maybe I hired someone who's 20% better, or more than that, better than someone else we would have gotten, right, then I can increase that value across the company. Every single hire is just a little bit better than otherwise. There's a lot of value to that, right? Or they click a little bit better with the team. There's all of these kind of intangible things that go a long way. You're building the right culture, right? The value that I can drive, transcends my own kind of limited ability if I was to go into something else. And I think that people understand that now. Like, I think it's really starting to be understood in the job market how important the right candidate is, how much value they can drive for the business, especially in software engineering. Getting people onboarded with the infrastructure and the tools and the process. If you rip out, you have to replace like a really good senior DevOps engineer. That process, like getting up to the speed of where the previous engineer was, can take months, right? And so you really got to make sure that you're hiring people who are going to stick around for a long time, that are a really good fit for the business, that kind of love and are motivated what they do. And I think that companies are realizing, hey, we need to invest more in recruiting. We need to get this right, and we need to make sure that we have a happy group of team members.
Yeah, right on. So a couple of key points that I really want to pull out there.
Sure.
Some of it is buzzword, corporate mumbo jumbo, but some of them are true major topics that every company in the world is experiencing today. And first and foremost is that competition for talent.
Sure.
And I think the word competition might even put it lightly. We were talking before, it's a flat out war. And I think some of that competition is not just something that digital startups and online companies and brands are facing, but 100-year-old legacy family-owned operations are still in this same fight. Not just to find the most productive employee, but to build that company culture that you talked about.
Yep.
Can you highlight a little bit of how the culture you're helping to build at Rokt is inherent in the company's value and soaring, growing presence.
Sure. Yeah. I think that those things are so linked, right? Talent and culture, right? Because I think to your point, right? This war for talent, like really what, the question becomes like, what underlies that, right? Like, what's the reason behind that? And I think one is, economy's coming back and, there's a lot of demand for talent, right? But I think it's also that through the last couple of years, everyone, had some time to reflect and, what they realized was they wanted more out of their work, right? They wanted something that was a little bit more fulfilling or a little bit more interesting, or they felt like a little bit more appreciated, whatever it was, right? But I think everyone got a little bit more selective, right? They really wanted to make sure that their work experience, was better going forward. And to that end, I think culture is such a key part of what people are looking for, right? And we were talking about this earlier, that idea of like, can you get a quick fix, right? Is there something that companies can do so that they're positioning themselves well to interact with the talent and attract that talent? And actually, I think it's because it's so based in the culture, it's really hard. It's not pizza nights or happy hours, right? It's really like, are we as a company able to provide our teams with interesting problems, with environments where they can be themselves, with processes and conversations and meetings where they can voice their opinions and really kind of drive that value they want for the company. That's a big thing I hear tons of candidates talk about, is like, I want to work hard on interesting problems, and I want to drive value for a business. And that's kind of a cool thing, right? That like the candidate, the job seeker's goal is actually really well aligned with the company, right? Like, I don't think this is something where, the company has to bend over backwards doing a bunch of stuff that, people want that are just kind of superfluous. Like, I think it's actually in the company's best interest to provide that right kind of culture that's going to attract talent, because then those people are going to get there, they're going to be happy, they're going to be motivated, they're going to work hard, and they're going to drive a lot of value for these businesses.
It's a way that companies can engage their employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's what separates working for my company, your company, their company from the competition.
Yes.
And whereas there are a lot of skill sets that can fold across different lines, I want to bring my talent to this company because, right? LeBron James, I want to bring my talents to South Beach because he wanted to go win a championship. It's that same mindset of what that championship means to me, right? Does that mean you're going to pay me the most dollars? Are we going to work together and create this something that's so game changer and, so different and new that gives me a reason to get up and go to work every day?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in my mind, because compensation is important, right? We all want to feel like we're getting paid, what we're worth, right? That we're able to kind of take care of ourselves, our families, right? Our financial obligations. But I think to your point, like, people have kind of moved beyond just financial compensation, and they're focused on that championship, and again, to your point, like, could be anything, but I think a lot of people, they want to be part of something exciting, right? And I think like that's where startups like Rokt shine, right? We're on this great trajectory. We're doing all this cool stuff. We're innovating in a space. We're driving a lot of value for our customers, right? Like, whether you're a salesperson, you're selling something, you want to sell something good, right? You want to sell something where your customer is not like felt like you pulled something over on them, but actually feels like you created value for their business, right? As someone in talent acquisition, when I hire someone, I don't want to lie to that person to get them to join the company. I want to show who Rokt is, our culture, our unique situation, and make sure that resonates with them, because I know if they do say yes to that offer, if they're a good fit and they're excited about it, that's going to be they're going to be happier here, right? They're going to enjoy their work. They're going to like have fun hanging out with the team, and like that's one of the things that really is what I look for in my work, is like being part of this company where I'm finding all these awesome people. They're recruiting, they're coming in, and then they're like enjoying their experience at the company. They're meshing well with their teams. Like that's a really fulfilling experience for me as a recruiter.
In terms of showcasing who Rokt is and why I should be a fit for that company.
Yeah.
Is there anything unique? You mentioned it's not pizza parties. Is there anything unique that separates your culture and gives you guys a competitive edge over competition?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think there's a few things. And I think, honestly, it starts with kind of that drive for innovation that we talked about, that drive to generate value, to be in an interesting space. I think one of our values is own the outcomes, right? And because everyone says, hey, you need to understand your customer and really what they want and be in tune with them. But for us, it's not just that, right? It's like, not just being in tune with the customer and understanding what they want, but making sure they're getting those things, right? Owning those things, right? And I think to that end, we really try to enable that at the business, right? Making sure that people have the tools that they need, the resources that they have, the teams and the environment, right? And this kind of brings me to my next point, which I think is we are hybrid, right? We've got an office in New York. We have an office in Sydney. I think I mentioned earlier we were founded in Sydney. We're actually headquartered now in New York. Big team here. And then we also have smaller teams in London and in Singapore, Japan, right? But all of those locations, we have offices, right? And we're hybrid. We're 3 days in. And I think that in-office environment just goes such a long way to building the right culture. And it's not even just like, oh, it's nice getting to see people, right? And we have really 2 fully stocked kitchens with like plenty of coffee and beer, and I do basically, those are my 2 major food groups when I'm hanging around at the office. But like I think it also goes to this. I think we were talking about this earlier. Organic interaction, right? We have these kind of open spaces, easy to kind of sit down, grab a drink, talk to a friend, or drink after work, or coffee in the morning, or just lunch. We have catered lunches 3 times a week as well, right? And you get these natural conversations, and I think sometimes they're just kind of fun, easy, talking about the game or some movie on on TV or whatever it is. But sometimes it's you're talking about the business and you learn something that you didn't know from someone in a different department. Or
spot on.
Yeah.
I tell you, coming up and starting my career in the real estate industry, pre-COVID, pre-quarantine, I was able to learn so much more in those off water cooler type interactions, off chance with senior leaders, or even with somebody who is just a couple months ahead of me in their career.
Yeah.
You can learn where the bugaboos are and how to best interact with prospects and clients, and certain behavioral tricks that I would not have been able to pick up on as fast had we started our careers during lockdown or during this era of the hybrid work.
Yeah.
Now, I do believe that there are significant benefits towards the hybrid part of it.
Yeah.
There are days where we're locked in with Zoom call after conference meeting and this and that and the other, where it's difficult. Is it to make it worth the commute? Are those little one-off conversations going to happen if I'm going to be locked in a conference room all day? Some days, yes. Some days, no. But there are some days where we want to be there because we want the opportunity to learn a new piece of information, to bring it to best suit our team and our business. And I find it very difficult to replace that human-to-human interaction, even if it's only for a couple days a week.
Sure. No, and I think it's, in my mind, one of the big problems around this whole conversation about in the office versus hybrid versus remote is that it's so easy to identify the obvious benefits of remote work, right? I can live anywhere and I have a lot more control over my schedule, and I can live outside of city, or whatever it is, right? But the value that being in the office provides, right? It's a little bit more nuanced, but it's so game changing, right? The company at Rokt, we have very ambitious hiring goals, looking to hire a couple hundred people over the next year or so. And, for us, we're going to be onboarding so many people. We're going to be training so many people, right? That the value of sitting with your team, and if you have a question, being able to turn and just ask that question versus like sending an email or a chat message or whatever it is, and hoping the person you sent it to is available to get back to you, right? That speeds up education so much, right? Mentorship is a big thing. Like one of the things that I think is the most important thing, especially for people early in their career to be looking for in a good company, is mentorship. Who's going to manage you? Can they train you? Can they bring you, can they add to your kind of education, to your growth? So hard to get that mentorship in a remote environment. Like, yes, you can have one-on-ones. Yes, you can have team meetings, right? But like you're just so much of the conversation, the interaction, the teaching, the learning moments, so much easier to have in an office environment.
There were a couple senior leaders early on in my career that would take calls unless they were of supreme confidentiality with the door open or next to me or invite me into their office to listen. And it's those moments that I cherished growing my career, and I feel bad that not everybody had the opportunity to learn in the way I did. And as a result, I was one of the first people to come back when they opened the doors to the office. Has your team at Rokt have any trouble trying to get people to come back, or is it as soon as COVID was over, we can open the doors, people are excited to get back? How is it on your end?
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, I think every company navigated that a little bit differently, and what really gave, I think, the team at Rokt confidence when we did kind of reopen the doors is that the leadership was very transparent. Our chief people officer, Sarah Wilson, did an amazing job, like kind of always communicating clearly, like, here's what we're seeing. This is we think the risk, where we want to be safe. For example, when we had that kind of Omicron wave, the rise of Omicron, it kind of sounds like a Transformers movie title, but, kind of hit us. I think for us, we went to optional in the office, right? And, myself, I was still coming in here and there, and getting to see kind of the other people that were coming in, and I saw a lot of value in that because, I was okay taking on the risk. I live alone, right? I'm I can do that. Some people, they can't, right? And they can make those decisions. And I think because we gave that flexibility, that the leadership gave that flexibility, when we did make the decision, like, hey, we're going back in, 3 days, and we're looking for people to do that. There wasn't any fight back because, the team felt like, hey, they've made the right decision, right? They didn't force this. They didn't rush this. We feel confident this is the right move. It was great. I think like people coming back in. So I've kind of gone through like 2 let's come back into the office waves being with Rokt. And the first time I came in, I was actually working on this role with one of the members of our sales enablement team, this guy named Daniel Wright. He's been at the company for 5 years, like really knowledgeable, super smart. And I was recruiting this solutions engineer role for him. And it was so tough to find the right person for this role. Team was very selective, which I always encourage, right? Like you should be selective, right? Find the right person for the job because you want that long-term fit. But it had been like a month or so, hadn't closed it. And I came into the office and it was like the first time meeting him in person. And we kind of had this, this really kind of sincere interaction, right? And he, it was kind of like this empathy moment of like, he's like, look, I get it. It's a tough role. Like, don't stress. I know you're working hard on it. Because I'm sitting there worried like, oh man, is this guy going to get mad at me? I'm going to lose my job because like, I'm not filling this role for him. And it was just like that weight came off my shoulders of like, he gets it, right? Like we're human beings trying the best we can, make this work. And like, it's crazy to me to think that you just don't get that in a remote environment. You're not going to have that moment of like sincerity, like that you can kind of have. And I think that like everyone at Rokt kind of feels that coming back into the office. You can tell there's like this much better energy, right? Like, we've got a good environment in our office and I talk to candidates all the time too, especially candidates who are at companies that are remote and they're like, geez, I just want to get out of my apartment, man, and like see some people, and so I think that there is, this drive, this actual appreciation for that office environment.
So with that in mind, talking to candidates, and there are always going to be some who do and some who don't want this. Are you seeing a lot, if any, aversion to, hey, we're in the office 3 days a week or a couple days a week? Do you come across any of that still, or?
Not so much. I think to some degree, maybe that's because we're pretty upfront, right? We have hybrid on our LinkedIn job posts, right? And when we ask the question on the job application, like, hey, are you good with being in the office? Because if not, this probably isn't going to be a fit. So a lot of the people that reach me, when we have conversations, they've already kind of self-selected into that. But I think, I still do like this thing called Lunch Club. I don't know if you've heard of it. I'm not promoted by them or anything like that, but they have like it's just a way of other professionals connecting. It's like 30-minute things. You put your preference and whatnot. And I'll connect with other professionals in the New York area, and we'll talk about these things. And it's
speed dating for salespeople.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's been great for me because most of the conversations I have been fantastic. It's always nice to just kind of like get that other person's perspective, like just random professional's perspective. And I think overwhelmingly it's an appreciation for being in the office, right? I think people have unique situations that skew them more towards remote, but in those cases they also know what they're giving up, right? They know that they're not going to be as connected to their team. They know that they're not going to be able to kind of have those relationships. And so I think that there's everyone's kind of making that decision for themselves, but I think that the overwhelming in my experience is that people like we're human beings, we're social creatures, like even the introverts of the world like want to find that right balance and still be able to kind of interact. So I think it goes a long way.
James, you made a really awesome point there, talking about how Rokt values the office space. Not just in New York, but in all the markets where you guys have significant talent. You opened an office, physically opened an office. I want to say that again, physically opened an office.
Yeah.
And do you think from the recruiting side of things, is that a benefit to the company? Is there something that the office brings or a way to showcase who you are versus, we're in the office in some markets and we're hybrid in others? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think like the cool thing about the office is it's kind of like it's a card in our deck, right? Like we can leverage it in a lot of different ways, and it's not just recruiting. Like this is like we definitely, now that people are more comfortable coming in and all this kind of stuff, we're bringing in candidates, right? And like we try to set up, hey, come in, grab lunch with the team. We'll have you sit down with one of the with your manager, your guy we want you to gal we want to manage you, right? And you can tell the difference between that conversation that you're having before and the conversation you're having after, right? They see that office environment, and our offices they're pretty nice, right? We've got these beautiful plant walls, all these open spaces, right? Open desks, stand-up desks, right? It's just a great spot, and people come in, they have the catered lunch, like our teams do. Our facility teams do an amazing job, right? So we've got an events coordinator, Haley. She's amazing. We've got a lot of support staff there, like Juliana and Jeremy. They're great at what they do. We've got some great people kind of managing the office. We got Nez. We've got like the team that comes in and keeps that place spotless. Like they're always working behind the scenes. They make things easy for us because they do such a good job. There's never a problem there. But we really get to play that card, I think, in the sales team too, right? Like I think this goes, every time we have a client in the office, we have this thing called TGIF. It's at the end of the week on Friday, and people give shout outs, thank yous to other teams that have helped out, and the marketing team and the facilities team and our people team always get shout outs when a client comes in. They're always like, wow, the client really had a great time. It's a great experience. We give them a little bit of swag. We make sure that they're well fed, right? And, I think that goes such a long way to building those relationships. We talked a lot about getting to know people in person, right? But having like that, that chance to kind of flex the office a little bit, I think it really helps.
I tell you what, that's a really awesome point. We hear about the office is the tool to recruit and retain talent.
Yeah.
Heard that time and time again. This is the first instance I've heard. Interestingly enough, I've experienced it, but didn't make the connection.
Yeah.
That the office is not just a tool for talent, but it's a tool to help drive sales.
Yeah.
And create those relationships with the customer.
Yeah, especially startups too, because like part of the startup game that you have difficulty around is like legitimacy, right? You want people to be like, hey, you're giving us, investors like lots of money. We're going to get millions of dollars of your money. Like, you come in and you're in this kind of like shabby looking location, or if all of your calls are on Zoom calls or whatever it is, right? Really hard to kind of solidify in that investor's mind, like, hey, we're legit. We're going to make it. We're a good investment. And this was a big thing. One of I started at a company called Cherry, and we moved locations to while I was there to a much nicer office. And I remember talking to the co-founders about this, and they're like, "Yeah, man, this goes such a long way. It's like, yeah, it's one of the investments that we're making with the money that we have, because we know it's going to pay off long term."
So that's a great point. Does your team on the talent acquisition side interface with the facilities team so much before you bring in some of these guests into the office, or is it after and we're going to review and let's look to improve on this the next time? How does that dynamic fit in?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, I think I mentioned this idea. Like, they just do such a good job. We don't have to worry, right? Like, we do kind of have to get the visitors kind of registered at the door and make sure they're coming in, and then we have the office space and everything like that. But I think the other thing is, with the technology that exists now, we use G Suite to kind of manage offices and rooms, and we can book, right? And there's a lot of other tools for this, but it's just so seamless. It's so easy, right? It's like you book a room, like you immediately, the technology knows that you're in there. You can start the Zoom call, right? Nobody else can book it, right? So you don't have people fighting over rooms. It's really, it's easy to bring people in, right? It's easy to kind of reserve that space how you need it. And and the team, like, I think part of the reason that we don't have to worry about the facility stuff is they've already solved so many of these problems, and anytime one of them comes up, they just solve it right away.
So I think it's interesting in that point too, where you're not just showcasing who you are to the prospective candidates. You're giving your team an opportunity to further interview them. Basically, it's a live tryout almost.
Yeah.
And you get to see the way they interact with the staff and the people in a way that you wouldn't be able to easily duplicate on Zoom and Teams and G-Chat, all those other et cetera's.
It's funny. I remember one of my coworkers telling me the story about one of the companies she used to work at. The way that her CEO would interview people is she'd have them come in, and they'd have them wait in the waiting room, and they have one of the cleaning staff come through and clean, and they see how they interact with them, right? Because like, you want to see people that are interacting favorably, nice with everyone, right? And I think it's the same way. Like, we talk to the facility staff, like, were they nice, and they come in and they greet you, right? Like, do they have good interactions across the business, right? Also, people can be sometimes different between how they seem in a video call and how they seem in person, right? And so I think you're absolutely right. Like, there is this kind of, do they kind of vibe with the whole company, right? Not just the few conversations that they've had. And I think this is also hugely beneficial to the candidate, right? If I'm a candidate and I've interviewed, even if I've had great conversations with all of the team, if I've never been to the office, I've never seen what that looks like, I don't know what the facilities is like, I've never met people in person, that's so difficult, to really make the right decision if that's going to be a fit.
That's awesome. And you hit that point earlier, and I love how you keep driving that home. The talent acquisition side is not just showcasing who you are, it's creating that match, almost like any other sale between the customer and the in this case, the product is the company.
Yeah, no, I say that all the time. Recruiters are basically salespeople for jobs. We're selling opportunities, but I think good salespeople, they're not just going to force a product on someone. They want to make sure it's a fit. That's a value add, right? That's how you gain trust. That's how you build a relationship. And it's the same thing I think in recruiting. It's like, candidates don't want recruiters that they feel are just being pushy, that are just trying to like get them to sign something, right? They want to feel like they can kind of, that the trust, they have trust in the recruiter, that they're really trying to find that best fit between candidate and company. And that's a big thing for me, is like, if we've had candidates who have been awesome, and we're like, just look, we can't set you up for success because we can't give you what you want, or we're not in position to kind of mentor you at the level. We don't have the bandwidth to do that, and it's sad to kind of see those great candidates go, and you can't find a hot spot for them. But if they're not going to be successful, you shouldn't be trying to force that.
One of the things that I noticed about you as we first met was you're a good writer. Great,
Thank
even, you. Right? It's some of the LinkedIn blogs. If you haven't, James Donovan, you got to go check him out. Some of your LinkedIn posts have been not just loaded with memes and jokes, but educational. One of the topics that I found was very interesting as relates to this war for talent, it was you called the Great Reshuffling.
Yep.
Can you give us a little, summary on that? I would obviously don't want to give away the keys to the kingdom.
Sure, yeah. Well, no, this is kind of a shameless plug. I do have a website. It's called it's just jameskdonovan.com. Really simple. Also, definitely look me up on LinkedIn. I love to interact with people, talk. I am trying to get more interactive and build that network, and because I think like this is a really interesting time, right? To your point, the Great Reshuffling, or I think initially it was being called the Great Resignation. I don't think that was right. I don't think people were just resigning. I think people were searching, right? So I've Great Reshuffling. I've also heard it called the Great Renegotiation. I actually like that, I think, a little bit better. But really what it is, and we've talked a little bit about this idea, is people are had that time to reflect. What do they want? What's important to them, right? They, we're coming out into this job market where there's this war for talent, right? And there's a lot of opportunity out there, right? And one of the things I caution people a lot is that, recruiters will sell you a song, right? Like they'll tell you whatever they need to tell you sometimes to get you to join the company. I think that really what recruiters should be doing is making sure that you're a fit, right? Really driving towards that. But the grass isn't always greener, right? Like I think every company out there is engaged in this war for talent, right? And I think that our goal at Rokt hasn't been, hey, let's just hire. We have these hiring goals, not just, hey, we just need to hire as many people as we can. We want to hire the right people, right? Like one of my goals that are always in the back of the mind. This is hard to kind of measure as a recruiter because you're usually measured on hires, right? But it's also like the longevity of the hires that you hire, right? And for me, like I want to hire people that are going to be happy, they're going to stick around, right? They're going to fully vest their stock, and they're going to retire and be able to buy a house or send their kids to college or whatever it is. And so for us, I think the way that we're kind of building our resources and fighting the war on talent is really showcasing our culture. And the cool thing is we didn't have to change it too much, right? We've talked about what are the things that attract people. It's this great kind of ability to drive value for the company and interact and share ideas. It's this culture, this in office hybrid culture where you can kind of interact and build relationships. And then I think it's also like that chance for growth. Right, that chance to grow and improve and learn and the cool thing about Rokt is we already had that. We didn't really have to make a big shift. It was more about how do we showcase that, right? Like we already think we have got a great culture, and we also don't want to change it, right? It's like we are who we are, right? Sometimes you meet a candidate, they're awesome, you're an awesome company, it's not a good fit, that's fine, right? Like you don't want to force a match that's not going to work, and so. I think like when I think of a lot of the companies out there, I think what it comes down to is not, hey, you need to change your approach to talent. It's you need to kind of take a look at yourself. It's like in the dating world, right? Like if you're not having that much success out there finding someone, sometimes the question isn't like, am I going to the right bars? Am I using the right lines? Like it's, how are you as a person, right? Like, are you working on yourself? Are you someone who's like, fun to hang out and talk to, and like you have ambitions and all this kind of stuff. Like I think that the same thing with a company, right? The company needs to be a fun place to be. And then the people that you attract, those are the people that you want. The people that, like you might have great engineers out there that aren't a fit. That's fine, right? You let them go because, you don't want them starting and then leaving, right away. That's not good for
It's part of
anyone.
your mark on the company as well. Is you said it, loading up the people who want to be there, who's showing up every day,
yep.
who made the company a better place, who's invested and really brought value to the company. And it's a great way to think about things from the recruiting mindset, because it's something that I know traditionally hasn't been at a huge vocal point for a company.
It's true.
And I really appreciate your time today. And thanks so much on a couple of different items. You know, I learned a lot just being here. So the one thing I'd like to leave with is, being that we're a New York City real estate centered podcast.
Sure.
We touched on a little bit about the benefits of coming to the office. We touched on a little bit about you guys are hybrid and physical locations across the globe.
Yep.
Is there anything that separates New York from, you think, some of your other markets?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, I was actually just in the London office last week. You know, fun area. You know, really eclectic history, and you know, it's always nice to, like, if you're going to answer a question like that, you know, what makes New York unique?
Anchorman.
Yeah, it's coming back. To me, it's easier if you kind of see the contrast. And what I love about New York is it's just such like a real place, right? It's just like everyone here, they're after, you know, they've got that drive to go achieve something for themselves. This is where you come to make it, right? And I think that, like, all the people here are just like have that vibe of like they're out, they're doing stuff, right? And like when I think of, you know, coming to New York, being part of this environment, right? I'm always bumping into interesting people, right? I'm always bumping into people that are like out there driven to make something happen. And I think like that, our New York office, especially, like when I think about, you know, that downtime, that organic time, interacting with people, and, you know, we talked about all the business benefits, but I think like you're just meeting such interesting people. Like, I've gone to the mountains a few times now with coworkers. We went to karaoke. You know, we're going out to Hawaii next month. That's a company-wide, all expenses paid trip. We call it GKO. It's our global kickoff, and, you know, I'm excited, right? It's, you know, sometimes, you know, you hear people that go to corporate events, they're like, I gotta go to another corporate event, right? For us, it's like, wow, this great group of awesome people. We get to hang out. We get to, you know, go to these great places, and yeah, I think, you know, New York is like, I think, you know, it gets said all the time, right? It's like the people that make the city here, and I think that couldn't be any more true.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You know, lifelong New Yorker here, I echo a lot of that, right? The people is kind of what separates the city, not just in sheer numbers, but in quality and differences and different value that people can bring to the city every day. It's the food, it's the culture, it's the vibes. You can get me going on food in New York for a while. Just close with a couple quick rapid fires here.
Shoot.
Starting with New York food.
Mm-hmm.
Pizza or bagels?
Yeah.
Pick one.
Oh, pizza for sure, no question.
Where'd you go to?
You know, all right, this is gonna seem very basic, but artichoke pizza. It's just like whatever it is. Like, I know it's a chain. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this answer.
I hope so.
Yeah. Oh no, I expect it and I welcome it. But there's just something about like that like kind of rich, fatty, like, you know, creamy taste of artichoke pizza that, like, you're out, you're drinking, like. My problem is, like, I don't actually live in the city. I know it's a horrible thing. I'm gonna come clean on this. I live in Stamford, Connecticut.
Hey, you commute.
Yeah.
You make the effort to be here a couple times a week.
And that's the thing is, like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, it's like, is this guy for real? You know, with the hybrid stuff, it's like, dude, I'm door to door. I'm an hour and a half. So, like, you know, I'm in because I see that value. I'm willing to put 3 hours of my day towards, you know, being in the office. I think, like, it is really that important to me. But the reason I'm bringing this up is Stanford also has some pretty good pizza. Again, my pizza answers, like, you know, people are gonna hate me for this, but Stanford has some really good spots. Maybe not as good as New York, but if you're out there in Stanford, Colony Grill. So it's been around since 1935. Local legend. Delicious thin crust. They do this thing called hot oil. It's like, you know, olive oil soaked in stinger peppers. It's great. It's really unique.
Sign me
Yeah, you come out to Stanford, we'll grab a slice.
Absolutely. Well, James, thanks so much for your time. Just want to give you another quick shout out. JamesKDonovan.com. Check him out on LinkedIn from Rokt, and he is not just the recruiting lead, but their meme specialist. Again, I'm Patrick Steffens from Avis & Young. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.